Welcome back to the Wrong Advice Podcast. I'm your host, John Picciuto, and I'm very excited to have a very good friend of mine, Terry Tucker, on the line today. Terry, how you doing, my friend?
I'm great, John. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. I'll try to give you the reader's of my life. I was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. I am the oldest of three boys. Obviously, you can't tell this from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall and played college basketball at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. I have a brother who's 6'7" who pitched for the University of Notre Dame. And then my middle brother is 6'6", and he was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the National Basketball Association. And then my dad was 6'5", but my 5'8" mother was really the boss of us growing up. Didn't matter how big, how strong, whatever mom said, that's the way it went. So when I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available. And I was the first person in my family to graduate from college. And I was all set to make my mark on the world with my newly obtained business administration degree, and I look back now and realize what a knucklehead I was for, thinking I knew everything there was to know about business because I had a college degree. Fortunately, I was able to find that first job in the corporate offices of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. But unfortunately, I ended up living with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my grandmother and my father, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. In my professional career, as I said, I was a marketing executive. I was also a hospital administrator. I was a customer service manager. I was a police officer. And during that time, I was also an undercover narcotics investigator and a SWAT team hostage negotiator. Then I started my own. Yeah, it was pretty interesting. My own school security consulting business. I was a high school basketball coach. I've been a motivational speaker. Last year, I became an author. But for the last 9 years, I've been a cancer warrior. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for 27 years, and our only child, a daughter, is a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the newly created United States Space Force.
Wow, that is incredible. Wow, this is definitely the very first 6 degrees of separation or whatever it was that I've been able to touch upon the Space Force. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. I mean, it's funny though, because you talk to her and it's like, how was work? It was fine. What'd you do? I can't tell you. Okay, good talking to you. Bye. So.
Yeah, right. It's funny because it started off as one of those things that it's like, oh, is this real? Are they really actually doing this? And it is very much a real thing.
Oh, it's very real. And, it's funny because, she has wings on her uniform. And I'm like, what do you have wings for? She's like, we fly satellites.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. Different than, pilot's wings. We fly planes. So, yeah, it's great to be on the ground floor of something as interesting as a new branch of the military.
Absolutely. You've obviously had a number of careers in a number of fields, and we'll obviously touch upon your cancer battle in a little bit. Walk me through kind of the progression and the timeline of kind of how you got to where you are today. Obviously, you've done a number of different things in a bunch of different industries. What was like the main reason behind that? And also, was there anything that you did that you hated, that you loved, and kind of walk me through the career progression for you?
Yeah, my passion, kind of the thing that burned in my heart to do was to be a cop. But my dad, his father, my grandfather, was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. So he was in Chicago during Prohibition. He was in Chicago as a police officer during, the Al Capone, the gangs and all that kind of stuff that was going on. And he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. It was not a life-threatening injury. He was shot in the ankle. But my dad always remembered the stories that my grandmother told about the knock on the door of, Mrs. Tucker, please grab your son. Your husband's been shot. Come with us. And he was like, absolutely not. So he had my whole life planned out. You're going to go to college. You're going to major in business. After you get out of college, you're going to go into, but that wasn't my passion. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, he was sick. He was really dying. He had end-stage breast cancer. And he was my hero, and I loved him. He was my dad, and I didn't want to do anything to upset him. So I did what he wanted me to do. I went to work for Wendy's, and then I became a hospital administrator. And those were not my passions. Those were jobs that I learned a lot, where I met some great people, but they were not what I was put on this earth to do. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of joke. I always say that I did what every good son did. I waited till my dad died to follow my dreams, but that's really the way it was. I was 37 years old when I became a rookie police officer. And, that was my passion. I loved it. I couldn't wait to get up to, what are we going to do today? Who are we going to help? How are we going to make a difference? And I really enjoyed that job. And, I was an undercover narcotics investigator. And, people were like, you were 6'8". How did you,
I was actually going to ask that.
Yeah. How did you do it? And like, the thing that motivates that industry, and it is an industry, is greed. And if you have money, people are willing to, to sell you drugs. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of, how that industry worked. I was on SWAT. I love that. But I always say what got me through cancer, and I think a lot of times what got me through my life, are what I call the 3 Fs: faith, family, and friends. And when my wife lost her job in Cincinnati, and that's where I was a policeman, she was the primary breadwinner. And so she couldn't find a job in Cincinnati, and she found one in Houston, Texas. And as much as I loved that, my family was more important than my job. Mm-hmm. And so we moved, and I took what I learned in the police department, started a school security consulting business, and then I coached high school basketball. And my daughter got my height. She's 6'2" and had an NBA 3-point shot, which is why she went to the Air Force Academy to play, Division I basketball. So that in a nutshell, that's kind of how it worked. And, and if there's young people out there listening, what I would tell you is, if you have a passion for something, if there's something burning in your heart to do it, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things that you're going to regret are not going to be the things that you did. They're going to be the things that you didn't do. So find that passion, live it. And I'm telling you, when you get to the end of life, it's going to be a whole lot easier.
I think that's such an important perspective, and something that I touch upon frequently in my podcast is that, I'm 35, and for, let's call it, 14 years since my working career started, I did all the things that one is supposed to do. I got a job, I bought a car, I got an apartment, I bought a house. I did all these things that you're like supposed to do, right? I checked all these boxes, and ultimately it led me to a path where I just was completely and utterly unfulfilled in the things that I was doing. I was making a lot of money. I was, buying a lot of shit, but ultimately I wasn't very happy. And all of that comes to like a critical point in the last year where I started realizing that there are certain things that I want to do and certain things that I want out of life. And it's not a monetary thing, and it's not a job thing. It is a happiness thing. And a lot of those things don't come externally. They come internally. And I think it's a nice perspective to have someone, you're a little bit older than me, that is a relatable feeling that no matter what generation you're from, you only have so much time here, and it's a matter of making the most of what time that you do have.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I, I think there's a lot of people out there that were like me, that were, your parents have your life all planned out for you. Mm-hmm. They know where you're going to go to school. They know what you're going to do. And that's great if that's what you want to do, and if that's your passion. But if it's not, like you say, you're going to spend a lot of years being unfulfilled, getting up in the morning like, oh God, I don't want to go to work, and that kind of thing. And again, your work doesn't have to be your purpose. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you can have a job to pay the bills, but your purpose is, I'm working on putting together a food pantry in my community, whatever whatever your passion is. Mm-hmm. But whatever is in your heart. And I find so many people, I mean, certainly with the number of years I've had cancer and the number of years I was a policeman, I've seen a lot of people die. And the people who die what probably you and I would call, happy or peaceful deaths are the people that I kind of look at as they sought out their purpose in life. Once they found it, they lived it. And so when it comes to the end of their life, they're not, like the other people who go kicking and screaming from this world who, I want another day, I want another month, I want another year. Well, sorry, that was made way above your pay grade, that sure. decision. And, you don't get that anymore. And so that's what I want. I want to go to my grave, with a peaceful heart saying, you know what, I found my purpose in this life and I lived that purpose. And now it's time to move on to whatever's after this.
You mentioned faith and family, and obviously those are two important pillars for me as well. I'm extremely very connected with my family, and I'm lucky in that regard because as I've gotten older, I realized that's not the norm. But talk to me about how your faith has been something that's been tested and, maybe something that's been difficult to hold on to over what has been a 9-year journey with the disease.
Yeah, it's funny. I've had cancer since 2000, and people always ask me, it's like, do you blame God for this? And I'm like, no. I mean, I don't think God got up one morning and said, yeah, Tuesday, Terry Tucker, cancer. I don't think that happened. But I think what I've learned over the years, and I was brought up Roman Catholic and still am, still go to, I don't go to church now with COVID and things like that, but still, I pray for about an hour every day, and mostly for the people that I've met in my life that need prayer. It has been fairly recently that I've been asking for the miracle of, could you please get rid of this cancer in my lungs and things like that. But I believe, I feel in my heart, and I was on a podcast. So, well, how do you know? I don't. That's why it's called faith.
Sure.
When I had my left foot amputated in 2018, and I remember laying there in bed, kind of like healing, sort of at a crossroads in life. I did, and like looking at the ceilings, like, okay, God, what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? And I was kind of hoping the heavens would open up and the voice would come and all that. There's an old joke about when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So I never had any God talk to me. But what I did have is other people say to me, Terry, you should do this. You should write a book. You should start a blog. And I said, start a blog. I'm old. I can barely turn my cell phone on in the morning. You want me to put a blog together? But I did. And so I think there are ways in life where God kind of talks to you or kind of, says, here's a path. I'd like you to go down this path, but you certainly have the right to say, no, I don't want to go down. I'm going over here. But I find when you listen to your heart, Mike Krzyzewski, the coach at Duke, talks about leading with your heart, wrote a book about that, leading with your heart. And I think that's so important that you need to live your life leading with your heart, being open to the things that life throws at you and not like, well, I'm going to do what I want to do. Okay, and that's fine, and you have every right to do that. But in my experience, and like you say, I'm a little bit older than you, what I find is that if you lead with your heart, if you do the things that I think you were put on this earth to do and try to find those things and live them, you're going to be a whole lot happier and a whole lot more fulfilled than if well, I'm going to do this. Well, that's what you want to do. That's not necessarily why you were put on this earth.
I agree to a lot of what you said. I think I believe strongly in fate and things happening in life for a reason, and you end up where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be. And as also a Roman Catholic who has multiple, maybe to this point, hypocritical religious tattoos in my life, I struggle with two distinct things when it comes to my faith because I grew up in a very strict Catholic house, Italian household that was very, regimented and strict and religious and whatnot. But as I've gotten older, I feel as if my spirituality has grown exponentially, i.e. my belief in God, my belief in an afterlife, and like these grandiose concepts that I think are almost self-evident that they must and have to exist, but my reliance and or relation to organized religion in and of itself is like waning thinner and thinner. What do you make of like this feeling that I guess I have on a daily basis, this struggle between what I would call like faith and religion, because I don't necessarily ascribe them to being the same thing anymore?
Yeah, I don't think the Catholic Church has helped itself, certainly with the issues with, the priests that are abusing. I mean, my brother is for the last 22 years, he's been a principal of a large Catholic high school in Chicago and just was named the president of the school. And, the number of issues with with some of the brothers that teach at the school, the religious order that, potentially have abused kids and things like that. And it's certainly been an issue. And, when that continues to get thrown in your face, and when the Catholic Church doesn't stand up and lead, then you've really got a problem with that. I look at the sacraments that I am provided within the church, whether it's the Eucharist or reconciliation or whatever it is, these sacraments that were given to us, as something that fulfills me, that sustains me, that gives me, the courage to continue to move forward. But I'm not stupid or naive. I see what's going on, and
it's fundamentally it's people at its core, right? Like at the end of the day, people are flawed. So that's right. my biggest, like, my lack of being able to relate to this stuff anymore is simply because, like, you look at, like you mentioned, like all these instances of the priesthood and child abuse, and their inability to come around on things like gay marriage. And for me, it always felt like religion was supposed to be this inclusive place where we talk about God and love and family and friends, and it doesn't feel that way anymore. It doesn't. I'm unable to relate to the religion aspect of my faith the way I did, 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I don't know what the answer to that is for you. I look at the fact that if you think about, especially with both of us being Roman Catholic, and we're taught that, excuse me, that God is love, not that God manifests love or that God is love. And if you think about the fact that you and I were created by a God who is nothing but love. I mean, he is love personified, and he knew all the dumb, stupid, crazy, sinful things we were going to do, and yet still loved us enough to put us on this planet, to put us on this earth, to try to make a difference, to try to take that love that he gave us and then manifest it towards other people. To me, that is an incredible gift, I guess, for lack of a better word.
I like that.
And I, and I try, and that's my job. I can't imagine when I die standing in his or her, whatever you believe. I don't want to put my religion on anybody else, but whatever you believe the Creator to be, standing in that presence and be unable to account for the gifts and the talents that I was born with and that I didn't use to make the world a better place. I mean, if you think about it, there's never been another John like you. Never before you, never after you. You are that unique in the history of mankind. And when you start thinking about that, you realize that's pretty damn powerful.
Oh yeah.
That you are, there's nobody else who's ever been like you or ever will be like you. So what gifts did God give you, and are you using them to make his world a better place? Absolutely.
I think that's an incredibly important perspective, and one that, I hope to, re-achieve in time. Obviously, you've had a difficult personal 9-year struggle with, cancer. How has that diagnosis and that battle, you mentioned losing your foot, how has that strained your relationship with religion and God, and how have you sort of grown from it?
It really hasn't strained. I don't blame God because I got cancer. I never have. And I have this very rare form of melanoma that presented on the bottom of my foot. And, I had a callus break open when I was a basketball coach. I didn't think much of it. You're a coach. You're on your feet a lot. And I went to a podiatrist friend of mine when it didn't heal. And, he did the typical, let's put some pads in your shoes and all this kind of stuff. And when that didn't work, he took an x-ray and he said, I think you've got a little cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did, and he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it, no blood, no dark spot, nothing that would cause anybody to think that, oh my God, look at this is horrible. And he said, I've seen thousands of these. But he sent it off to pathology. And then 2 weeks later, he calls me. And like I said, he was a friend. And the more difficulty he was having telling me what was going on, the more frightened I became, until he just kind of laid it on the line. He said, Terry, I've been practicing for 25 years and I have never seen this form of cancer. So, you're like, well, okay, for me, it was, okay, God, I need your help now. I need you to, I need you even more than I probably have needed you in the past. But I never blamed him. And, and I asked my doctor, how did I get this? He's like, I don't know. And and the funny thing is, 2 years ago, I had a genetic test of all 88 genes that they either know cause cancer or suspect cause cancer. And I have no mutations in any of my genes. And yet I have this very rare form of cancer. Wow. So I don't spend a lot of time thinking, why did I get the, kind of the real highfalutin, esoteric kind of things. I don't worry about that. I'm not that smart, so I don't spend a lot of time, why did you get this? What's it? But I've got it. And this is my life. These are the cards that I've been dealt, and I have to play them, and I have to play them to the best of my ability. And I try to do that with a faith that, God, for some reason you gave this to me, or for some reason you allowed this to happen to me. Now I need your help, and tell me where you want me to go with this.
That's a wildly impressive mental attitude towards something that is obviously not easy to be positive about, and especially when you contemplate the longevity of the battle. I'm assuming you have good days and bad days and ups and downs. What kind of keeps you in this positive frame of mind? And I'm going to assume it's likely, faith and family. But I would imagine that that's a rather uncommon, mental attitude when it comes to battling something this serious.
Yeah, it's. I don't want anybody who's listening to us in this conversation think that I have an S on my chest and I wear a cape. I don't. I mean, I cry, I get nervous, I get down, I get depressed. But we're all going to get that in our lives, and it doesn't have to be like me, fighting a terminal illness. It could be, you flunked a test at school, you broke up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, you had a fender bender on the way, whatever it is. We're all going to get into those dark places. And pain is inevitable in everybody's life. Suffering, on the other hand, that's optional. What you do with that pain, how long you stay in that dark place, is up to you. And I've kind of come to what I call my, in addition to faith, what I call my 4 truths. And I'll give those to you. I have them on a Post-it note. They're sitting here on my desk, and I see them every day. And they're just 4 sentences. And I use these truths along with my faith to really kind of guide the decisions that I make about, on my life, on treatment, on things like that. So number 1 is you need to control your mind, or it will control you. Number 2 is you need to embrace the pain and the suffering that we all experience in life and use it to make you a stronger and more determined individual. Number 3 is what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And number 4 is, as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I had a nurse recently come to me. I'm on a clinical trial drug for these tumors that are in my lungs, and it just beats the hell out of me. I mean, I'm at the hospital Monday through Friday, taking these drugs and shaking and throwing up and getting it's just ugly. And she came to me one day and she said, Terry, this trial is just beating the heck out of you, and nobody would think anything less of you if you quit. And I tried to explain these truths to her, and I said, my doctor may take me off the trial, or I may die on this trial, but I will never quit this trial, because that's just not in my makeup. It's, I'm going to be full speed ahead as long as I think it's the right thing to do. Don't get me wrong. I'm not blindly. I mean, I think my oncologist kind of hates me because I'm always asking why. Why are we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? I want to be involved in my own healthcare. I want my life to be shaped by the decisions that I make, not by the ones that I don't, or the ones that other people make for me. So I use those truths and my faith to make decisions. I remember I came, you'll enjoy this story. I came home after finding out I had the tumors in my lungs, and my doctor wanted to do chemotherapy, and I was like, I don't really think I want to do this. We're 8 years into this. I am exhausted. I don't really think I want to do chemotherapy. And so I came home, and I was talking to my wife and daughter, and immediately my daughter's like, all right, we got to have a family meeting. Like, there's 3 of us. What do you mean we got to have a family meeting? So we have a family meeting, and we talk about it for a few minutes, and then we take a vote. and my wife and daughter vote for chemotherapy. I vote for no chemo. I lose. So now I'm taking chemotherapy, because my family is that important to me. And I remember when I was in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor had us bring a photograph of the people that we love the most to class. And while we were learning techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph, because he reasoned that you would fight harder for people you love than you will fight for yourself. Mm-hmm. And, he wanted you to know that at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're fighting some drunk guy who pulls out a knife, that there are people at home, whether it's a husband or wife or mother or dad or your kids or whatever it is, that want you to come home, that this is bigger than you. That it's not just about you. This is something bigger than yourself.
I mean, that it's a bit awe-inspiring me, to be honest with you, Terry, because obviously I have not had any sort of relatable trials and tribulations in my life that I can look at and say, oh, I can relate by XYZ, because I don't have anything that is relatable to what you've gone through over the course of the last 9 years. But what I am curious is that obviously you're married, I believe you said for 27 years. Mm-hmm. How has your cancer diagnosis impacted your relationship with your wife? And I'm going to go on a limb here and say it's only done nothing but strengthened it. But making like these big decisions about things like chemo and treatments and next steps and stuff, walk me through kind of how you guys have combated this illness.
So my wife is Norwegian by heritage, so that should pretty much tell you that, she's very, very stoic, very, but the funny thing about my wife is that before she married me, before she met me, she had never seen the inside of an emergency room in a hospital, ever.
Wow.
And I mean, talk about being fortunate. And so you get into this, with your partner, and she's absolutely my partner, and we do these things together, and we talk about the decisions that we're going to do. And I mean, she gets up I have my every third week, I go to the hospital Monday through Friday for that clinical trial drug. She gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning with me so that, we can be there at 6. And, there are days where I'm there till 10 o'clock at night, and, she comes and picks me up, and she does the ugly things, physical pain, you can deal with. Mm-hmm. It's physical. You can deal with the emotional pain, which is really what she's dealing with. I had my left leg amputated. Talk about a joke. I always joke with my orthopedic surgeon. I'm like, you're piecemealing me to hell one body part at a time. It's like, here's a foot. Okay, here's a leg. There you go. And we kind of joke about that, but I had that done last April, right in the middle of this global pandemic. My wife dropped me off at the hospital to have my leg amputated, and she was like, I don't know what to do. I said, sit in the parking lot and pray. I don't know what to tell you. This sucks. I wish you were with me, but you can't be. Mm-hmm. And, just wait for the doctor to call you. So, I mean, that's what hurts me, is seeing what I'm putting her through. And I know when you take the marriage vows, through sickness and health and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think anybody, expected this 9-year battle of just junk and garbage and pain and all the things I've been through that she has to watch, that she can't help me. Mm-hmm. But when I was first diagnosed, our daughter was in high school, and my wife and I made a conscious decision to never lie to her. We would always tell her the truth, obviously age appropriate for what she can understand. And I mean, now she's an adult in that, so she's fully vested in everything that's going on. But this is a family thing. This is not just Terry has cancer. This is the family has cancer, and we're all dealing with it in our own different and unique kind of ways. So, but I would be dead, no doubt in my mind that I would be dead if it hadn't been for my wife. And some of it, she's like, that doesn't look right. We're going to go to the emergency room. And yeah, you're right. If I had to stay at home, I'd probably be dead.
Wow. That's incredible. Explain to me about the book that you wrote. How much did your cancer diagnosis inform the writing of that book, and how did it feel to finish something like that?
It was pretty amazing. I mean, the book was born out of two conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached who she and her boyfriend had moved to Colorado where my wife and I live, and we had dinner with them a couple times. And I said to her, I'm really excited that you're living here in Colorado, and I get to watch you find and live your purpose. And she got kind of quiet for a while, and she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I don't know what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding that purpose, and then once you find it, living it. So that was one conversation. And then I had another one with a college student who reached out to me on LinkedIn who said, what do you think are the most important things that I should know to not only be successful in my job or in business, but in life? And I didn't want to give him the, get up early, work hard, help others. Not that those aren't important. They are. They're incredibly important, but they've kind of been done a lot. I wanted to give him something different, something unique, something that maybe would resonate in his soul. And so I thought about it for a while, and I wrote notes, and eventually I had these 10 principles, and I was comfortable enough that I sent them to him. And then I kind of stepped back, and I'm like, okay, I got a life story that fits under this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates this principle. And so literally I had my leg amputated in April of last year, and I started chemo for the tumors in my lungs in June. So during that 3-month period, I literally sat down at the computer every day while I was healing and would write stories underneath all these principles. And eventually just had, the book is called Sustainable Excellence, the 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And so here, all of a sudden I've got this book, and I'm like, well, is it really worth publishing? Is it, like the book about some guy how his, cat jumps up on his garbage can, and that's a book, who cares,
Right.
Kind of stuff. So I gave it to two friends of ours. He was a former Navy SEAL, and she was a former prosecutor. And I said, be blatantly honest. I mean, if you think it sucks, tell me it sucks. And literally they were both like, you got to get this published. And so that's kind of how it came to be. And then when it got published, I was like, I got to sell books. I got to sell books. I got to sell books. And I connected with a best-selling author over in the UK, business author, and I connected with him on LinkedIn. And when he kind of came to me one day, and he's like, Terry, no. He's like, you're approaching this wrong. He said, your job is not to sell books. Your job is to help people. If you help people, the books will sell themselves. And I was so glad he kind of hit me in the face with that, because I didn't write the book to make money or be famous. I wrote the book to help people. And now it's all just about helping people. And if people buy the book, that's great. If they don't, that's fine too. But if I can make a difference through this book, and I think I have. I had an 87-year-old man who got the book and then read it and then reached out to me and said, if I would have had these principles when I was younger, I would have had a much better life. And I thought, wow, that there's something to this. So it was pretty, having never written a book, it was definitely something that I always say I wrote it, but I really kind of think it was inspired by God. God was like, listen, knucklehead, sit down at the computer, just type what I tell you to type, kind of thing. So I always kind of laugh about that, but I kind of think that's how it happened.
You mentioned that the book is meant to help other people. How much of the process over that 3-month period of time, or however long it ended up for you to actually finish the book, was a cathartic experience for you yourself?
Not a lot. I mean, it was, I had 2 rules when I started. So 1, I will write at least 1 page a day. And then 2, I will not edit anything until I have a first draft of it. So, there were days I sat down and it was like, okay, this is just garbage and this will never make it into a book. And then there were days where it was like, yeah, this is pretty good. But I never really, it was like, I'm going to write a book about my cancer experience or my cancer journey, at least not this one. I have written about my cancer experience, and I could probably put a book together by putting all that, together. But this was more about, those 2 conversations I had. So it was more about, here are these young people that are kind of like, well, where do I go with my life? Well, here, let me give you some advice from an old man. Here's what I've experienced. And I've had a pretty good life. I've done a lot of different things. And let me tell you the mistakes I made, and let me tell you the things that, that were great, and why those things were great, and why they led me to what I think is an uncommon and extraordinary life.
I like that, because obviously, I wouldn't say I necessarily struggled with like confidence in myself or my ability to do things in life, but I did for sure for a long period of time struggle with what the purpose was for me to be here. Because, you know, we can talk all day about God and existence and why we're all here, and that's going to be an unanswerable question. But at the end of the day, there is something that you need to do to fill up your time. You need to be ultimately fulfilled either through external relationships, internal happiness, or what you do for a living. And for quite a while, you know, there was a good 10-year period of time where I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm just doing what I think I'm supposed to be doing, but I don't necessarily relate to what I should be doing, i.e. what my purpose is. And I think it's only been in the last 4 or 5 years that I've grown comfortable and confident enough in myself to do things like start my photography, start my podcast, start writing again, and doing all these things that bring me joy that I stopped doing because it felt as if I didn't have the space for them within, you know, my daily life, etc. So I can relate to that question a lot. But I think what it does do bring back for me is that there is no too late period in time in life for you to figure out what it is that your purpose is or what you're supposed to be doing. And then what it also does is bring up a question for me, pros to you, that obviously your time here is indeterminable at this point. You've been struggling against a disease for a long period of time. How do you take what is an unknowable timeline for the rest of your life into how you fill up the time that you have left, i.e. the purpose of what you're doing with the blog, with the book, the podcasts, etc.?
Yeah, you know, I look back on, and it really wasn't until probably maybe a month and a half ago that my oncologist showed me the CAT scan photos of what my lungs looked like when I first started chemo, you know, well over a year ago. And I remember looking, and now the clinical trial drug has shrunk my tumors, and between chemo and this clinical trial drug, I mean, my lungs are much healthier, much better.
It's great.
And I looked at my oncologist, and I looked at him, I said, now I'm not a doctor, but looking at that photo, it's like, how was I alive? Mm-hmm. And he's like, I don't know. And you know, there's a reason I'm not dead, because I certainly should be. I mean, those tumors should have, you know, how I was still breathing, I have no idea. I mean, I had fluid around the pleural spaces between the lungs and, you know, and the ribs. I mean, I had all kinds of issues. And the fact that I was still going was like, I really kind of feel that, and you know, we keep coming back to the God thing, but, you know, I really think God was kind of like, I'm not done with you yet. It's not time for you to come home. So here's what you're going to do. You know, you're going to spend as much time as you can, you know, putting as much goodness, love, and positivity back into the world. One of the chapters I wrote in the book, it's the last chapter, but the chapters are not in any particular order, is about the importance of love and how much. And I'm not talking about romantic love. That you know, that kind of wanes over time and things like that. But how caring about each other. And another chapter I wrote in the book was about listening, but not listening to respond, but listening to understand. That was one thing I learned when I was a hostage negotiator. You know, as a policeman, most of your interactions are face to face. You know, and if I see you balling up your fists or kind of looking around, you know, I can say, well, maybe he's going to fight me if he's balling up his fist, or maybe he's going to run when he's looking around. Okay, I see those things. I've got a visual clue. Okay, I can sit you down. I can handcuff you. I can put you in the back. I can do things to mitigate that. But as a negotiator, the person you're talking to, your person you're dealing with, maybe blocks away, and you're talking to him on a phone, or, you know, at best, maybe you're talking to him through a door or something like that. And you have to figure out what's going on based on what they're saying, what they're not saying, and how they're saying it. So it was very important for us to kind of listen to understand as opposed to listen to reply. And I know I've done that. You're in a conversation, you're like, you know, I mean, hurry up, John, say what you're saying, because I want to get my 2 cents. You know, no, that's listening to respond. That's not listening for you. Like, John, what are you saying? Why are you saying that? Where are you coming from when you're saying that? You know, if we could do more of that as a world or as a society, we'd probably get a whole lot more done. Sure. You know, and a whole lot more, instead of screaming at each other, stop for a minute and just figure out, why is that person feeling the way they're feeling, and let's talk about that. Don't scream at each other, because I'm on the left and I'm this, or I'm on the right and I'm that, and you're wrong. It's not about right or wrong. We're all Americans. We're all people that, I look at the greatest generation. I had a friend when I first started down this cancer road, 93 years old, had been in World War II, part of the greatest generation. And he was all about, how can I help? And so many young people today are all about, what's in it for me? I'm not doing this if there's not something in it for me.
Sure.
Not a great attitude.
I mean, that's social media for you, because unfortunately, and I mentioned this on the last podcast that I did with my buddy Miles, unfortunately, where we have this technology to connect us greater than any other generation or group of people in the history of mankind, it also makes us the star in our own show, and everyone kind of has this higher than thou vision of themselves. So I'm not interested in listening to what you have to say, because I have something to say is an unfortunate byproduct of these things. When I have a supercomputer in my pocket and I'm able to tell people what I'm thinking at any moment's notice, it's easy for you to think that some of the things you have to say are significantly more important than they truly are.
Yeah, it's true. And I can't tell you how many podcasts I've been on where people have asked me, how do you want to be remembered? And I'm like, I don't really have any great desire to be remembered. Nobody's going to name a street after me, or, a basketball court after. I mean, none of that is ever going to happen. But when I look at it is that, how do I want to be remembered? As somebody who put as much love, goodness, and positivity back into this world, as somebody who found their purpose as to why they were put on this earth and lived it. If I can do that, that to me is a heck of a life, and a very fulfilling life. And that has nothing to do with me. That has, everything to do with giving of yourself to other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm going to harp on something that I said previously. Like, I'm inspired by your level of positivity for someone who has a long journey of pain and suffering and loss. That I don't think it would be necessarily easy for many people to maintain that level of positivity and spirit in what has obviously been a physically and mentally long journey. And you touched upon a lot of things that I think are important, because it gives people who may not be in your position today, but may be in your position at some point in their lives, I would hope that it gives them something that they can then use for their own battles. And there are people who are going through things on a daily basis, and it's not necessarily a cancer thing. It could be a depression thing. It could be any number of problems. And I think, obviously, that you have the type of attitude that I ascribe to have, and I would imagine other people do as well. After such a long journey, do you become numb to fear? Do you have things that you look at as something that you're afraid of or scared of at this point? Like, are you fearful of death? Are you accepting of death? Are you worried about the wreckage that you leave behind for your family and your friends when you're gone? Like, how do those things play into your mind?
No, I don't fear death. As a matter of fact, when I found out that I was going to lose my leg and I had these tumors in my lungs, my wife and I, we went to the cemetery, we went to the mortuary, we went to the church, and, we planned the funeral. I mean, all my family has to do is when I die, make one phone call, and it's all done. It's all taken care of. And people have accused me of, like, well, that's defeatist. And I'm like, well, yeah, no, I don't think so, because unless you know something that I don't, we're all going to die.
Yeah.
Everybody dies, but not everybody really lives.
Yep.
And so I've been down the road with my dad and my grandmother of being exhausted and having go with my mother to the funeral home and make all the arrangements. And it just beats the heck out of you. So I thought, you know what? This is a gift I can give to my family. And so you make one phone call when I die and it's done. Everything's taken care of. We've got everything worked out. So no, I don't fear death, and I don't mean this to sound crazy. I certainly don't want every psychologist in the state of Colorado at my door when I say this, but I'm almost, and this is going to sound bad, I'm almost excited about what's on the other side of this. I'm almost excited to see what the next step is, because in my mind, in my heart, in my soul, there is a next step. There is something after this. This isn't all there is. And, I mean, I've seen the birth of my daughter, which is, talk about a miracle and talk about something that changes you, so I don't fear death. I'm not in any great hurry to make it into the box or anything like that, but I'm not afraid to do it, because I think I found the purpose that I was put on this earth to do, and I lived it. So I can go back to our Creator and say, hey, you gave me these gifts. Here's what I did with them. I hope it was good enough. But that's the thing about God. I don't have to prove myself. Mm-hmm. He loves me anyway. I mean, it's like, he's trying to have a relationship. I mean, he's trying to find me, not me trying to find him. Please, Terry, let me into your heart. Let me, I am the vine, you are the branches. I'm just a branch. And I want to make it, I want to make this world as good, as positive as I can. And yeah, I've got a disability. I've had some bad luck. I mean, it's the old Winston Churchill quote of, if you're going through hell, keep going. I think most people will look at my story and say, yeah, you've been through hell. Yeah, I have. But boy, I'll tell you, hell has taught me a lot. I've met a lot of great people, but I'm not afraid of what's coming next.
Wow. I asked that question because obviously it's obviously on the precipice of things that I would assume likely come up often, but also as someone who is 35, I would say the only fear I have in life is death. And that's not to say that I have a fear of the physical pain or the act of it. It is the fear of not having fulfilled my purpose prior to reaching that point. And I would assume that it is a common and repeatable theme for anyone in mankind to fear death, and also fear that they haven't accomplished anything prior to it. But obviously you've done quite a bit in your time on Earth to, come to that understanding. And I think as I get older, I do become more and more comfortable in the things that I've accomplished or things that I have done. How much of the time that you have left do you look at like I need to spend it doing something important versus, say, like binging Netflix or watching a movie? Like, do you consciously look at your day-to-day and think, well, I don't need to do this because I don't know how much time I have left? Like, does that inform like your daily schedule and your daily activities?
In a way it does, because before COVID, I was able to sort of tell my story to groups, at different events and stuff like that. Well, now there's COVID, and so nobody's having, in-person events where they're looking for a speaker or something like that. So I spend the 2 weeks off I have in between therapy pretty much doing podcasts, and I always kind of feel like, I mean, I should be using these 2 weeks to rest, but I'm like, the heck, I'll get plenty of time to sleep when I'm dead, so I don't really worry about that. And my wife is always like, you know what, I'm limiting you to 2 podcasts a day. Well, I mean, today I got 4. So, and she gets mad, it's like, you need to be resting. I'm like, hon, in a way, these kind of energize me. They give me a purpose. This is something positive that I'm doing with my life, as opposed to, like you say, sitting around and watching Netflix. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of good stuff on Netflix. I rarely watch television. I read a lot. Like I say, I pray. I spend a lot of time trying to be a guest on people's podcasts, because I think I'm supposed to be doing this right now. I think I'm supposed to be, having these conversations. And I do. I'm on podcasts all over the world with people and I've met some great people, and we have some great discussions. And if you and I, having this discussion, if you and I can make a difference in one person's life, this has been a good podcast. This has been something good for both of us to do today.
Oh, I completely agree with you. It's fundamentally that outlook that has caused me to do things like start the podcast. And, you got 24 hours in a day. You don't need to be sleeping for 12 of them, right? You don't need to be mindlessly drumming along doing nothing. And I'm a night owl, so I'm up all hours of the night as is. So it's super easy for me to fill my day up with external things, whether it's photography or my podcast or writing or whatever it might be. But I couldn't possibly agree with you more. It's one of the reasons why I started this podcast. It's having the ability to, I hope, say something that is relatable to someone who maybe might not be able to articulate the thing that they're going through or articulate their feelings, but know that everyone has extremely common experiences in this life, and that it's super understanding for you to feel like you're alone when you're really not.
Yeah, you're in a big group of people, but yet you feel like you're alone. But again, I think that goes back to find something that's bigger than yourself. You will be tremendously fulfilled if you're involved in something that's bigger than you. Because I got news for you. Nobody gives a crap about you. I don't mean to sound that way. I mean, I care about other people, but in the mainstream, most people, they're all worried about their own problems and their own issues. They could care less about yours, So I know that sounds callous, but I think when people start to and I think you're kind of a perfect example. You're somebody kind of waffling along, not sure, and then all of a sudden you figure out, you know what, I should be doing this, and I should be doing a podcast, and now all of a sudden you're starting to feel fulfilled. You're starting to feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm feeling good about it. And I remember when the player that I told you about, who I told her I was excited that she was living near us. She said to me, "Well, Coach, what if I run out of time? What if there isn't enough time?" I said, No. No God is going to create you, put you on this earth, and say, "Here, I want you to do this," and then pull the rug out from underneath you and say, "No, sorry, I didn't give you enough time to do that." If you keep moving forward, if you keep looking for that purpose, and I reminded her of the story of Colonel Harlan Sanders, the man who started Kentucky Fried Chicken. He didn't start Kentucky Fried Chicken until he was in his 60s, till after he retired. Now, I don't know if that was his purpose in life. I'm going to assume that it was, but I told her, I said, you look at so many people that go down the road, I'm gonna find my purpose, and they get 10 years, 15 years into it, and they're like, you know what, I'm tired, I don't care anymore. I'm gonna just stay right where I am. And they do the same thing. Get up the same time every morning, the same breakfast, go to work, home, watch TV, go to bed. Those people are dead. They just haven't fallen over yet. Because if you're not growing, then you're dying, and those people aren't growing. But whatever you can do to grow yourself, to grow your skill set, to grow what's in your heart, whatever it is, that's what will lead you to your purpose. Being open to that purpose with your heart and not be like, I'm fed up, I'm not going to do anything. Those are the people that when it comes to the end of their life, those are the ones like, damn, I wish I had another life or another day or another month because I didn't do anything with my life.
Oh, absolutely.
You figured out that, I got to do stuff with my life. Excuse me. And then when I do, I'll feel fulfilled. And that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that, and I think the one key point out of all of that is that it's certainly never too late, right? You can be 65 years old and start a fried chicken chain. You can be 35 years old, lose a job, start chasing passions and doing things that you might not have thought a day ago, a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, you could do. I think it's the one thing I try to harp on as often as possible is that it's never too late to try something new, and it's never too late to make yourself happy, because we don't have all that much time here. And if you spend that time miserable, like you said, you're going to come out kicking and screaming, being like, fuck, I wasted a whole bunch of my life doing things that didn't ultimately fill me up.
Exactly. And I think you figured that out, but you and I both know there's a tremendous amount of people out there who haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, I know. It's it is it's an easy trap to fall into, because you fall into a reoccurring trend, a reoccurring routine that is difficult to break, and it does feel like getting off the hamster wheel at times. Like, it feels like I've been able to put myself in a position now where I'm doing things that truly make me happy, versus a couple years ago, I might have just been going through the motions. And I'm a young guy. I'm 35. If I at 25, if I had said 35 was young, I would have been like, no, you're old as shit. But in the grand scheme of my life, I'm not old. I've got time, and yeah, I appreciate that. I like to spend the last bit of my podcast asking a couple quick hitter questions, just kind of going into some of your favorite things, and then we'll call it a day. But what is your favorite book that you've ever read?
That's a great question. I would probably say, and I've read the Bible from cover to cover, so I think that's, for me, a really good book. But in terms of sort of what we would probably call mainstream books, there was a book, a coach at UCLA years ago, way before your time, called John Wooden. He was kind of, and he wrote a book called Call Me Coach. And that book, more than anything, kind of lit the spark in my, I've got to be a certain way. I've got to live my life by a certain set of standards. And, a lot of that came from reading They Call Me Coach. So I'm going to say that book, other than the Bible, probably had the biggest impact on my life.
Nice. I think I own that book. I'm pretty sure I do have it here somewhere. I've truthfully not read it yet, but I do have it. I have a huge problem with purchasing 6-7 books at a time from Amazon, and then the stack gets bigger and bigger, and then I don't get through nearly enough of them. What's your favorite movie?
Oh, I don't know. I have 3 favorite ones: Rudy,
oh yeah,
Hoosiers, and then Tombstone.
Oh, nice. I mean, Rudy, all-time classic. Hoosiers, obviously you played basketball, so it's understandable why that would be one of your favorite movies. I like that movie a lot. I do definitely think Rudy is. I would go Rudy, Tombstone, Hoosiers. That would be my.
Well, it's funny because when I lived in Cincinnati, the real Hoosiers, the real Hickory,
the real high school,
was a play. Yeah, it was in Milan, Indiana, and it was about an hour and a half drive from my house. And I remember my brother came in and my uncle came in, and we drove out there. We saw the school. The gym has been rebuilt, but they have part of the floor still in a kind of a case. Cool. Here it is, and we kind of drove around. And there's an old antique. I mean, it's a dinky little town. There's an antique store that doubles as a museum. And literally we go to the antique store and it's like, if you need anything, call this number. So we called the number. It's like, hey, we'd like to see the museum. And the woman's like, I'll be down in 5 minutes. And she came down, unlocked the place. It's small town Indiana.
That's awesome.
And so we got to see all that. So, that's probably another reason why it's a little more up on my favorite list.
Nice. That's awesome. That's very cool. What's your favorite food?
Vito and Nick's thin crust sausage pizza from Vito and Nick's on 83rd and Pulaski in Chicago.
Very nice. Thin crust in Chicago. That can't be very common.
It's not, but that's what makes it so delicious.
That's a Jersey pie. There's a place around the corner from I live in Caldwell, New Jersey, and there's a place called Angeloni's Pizzeria. They have what's called a thin pie, and I get it every week. It's just they've got the best pizza. Thin pizza for me is life for sure.
Absolutely. And they cut it in little squares, and it's just like fits in your. My mouth's watering right now. There you go.
Nice. What is your biggest piece of advice for someone that is hearing you on my podcast for the first time today?
I would say live your life with an open heart. If you do that, I don't think you can go wrong.
I like that. I think that's important, and I think that's good. I like that. Okay, my last question is, what is one recommendation that you have for everyone listening here today? It can absolutely be a shameless plug for your book, but I like people to recommend something that they've recently consumed, whether it's a book, a podcast, a movie, a TV show, whatever it might be, just something that you've consumed recently that you recommend everyone to take a look at or use.
So, yes, I would absolutely recommend my book, but I'm not going to plug it right now. I'm going to plug a book called Legacy, which was written by an individual by the name of James Kerr. And it's a book about the New Zealand national rugby team, where this author embedded with shirts? Them it's not the black shirt. Yeah,
It's the only one in New Zealand I know.
Yeah, it is. It's about them, but it's not the black shirts. It's something else. It's it's about them. And the thing that I came away from that with is that, you would think, and again, this is probably the most successful sports franchise in any sport, in any country of all times. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know, I read the book because why? Why are you that successful? Why are you that good? And one of the things I came away with is they bring people onto their team, not because, they're a good defenseman or, a good forward or whatever like that. They hire for character. If you don't have the character to be part of that team, you could be the greatest rugby player in the world. They won't put you on the team. And then there are examples in there of, when the game is over and, they go to the locker room, they change the captains stay behind and police the locker room so that it's cleaner after they leave than it was before they got in it. I mean, that's kind of how they live their lives and how they. Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why they're the most successful sports franchise of all times.
Wow, it's cool. I'll definitely have to pick that up, add it to my list for sure.
I was going to say, add it to your 8 or 9 Amazon books.
I do. I have a huge problem, but I do read like 2 or 3 books simultaneously. So I'll read like a fiction, a nonfiction, and then like maybe like a self-help book, all simultaneously. And I do end up reading a fair amount of books per year. I try to read at least like 20. But I think it would probably be doing myself a little bit of service by not continuing to buy books.
Yeah, exactly.
My recommendation is, I think I may have said this a couple episodes ago, but I was so floored by this week's episode. Mayor of Easttown on HBO Max has stars Kate Winslet. She's does a lower Pennsylvania accent like I'm incredibly amazed by, but oh my goodness, it was such a wild episode this past week, and the show has just been stellar from start to finish. I definitely recommend people to take a look at it and enjoy it. It's a little fucked up, but it is quite enjoyable for sure.
Nice. Okay, good.
Terry, I got to tell you, I'm super appreciative that you reached out to hop on the podcast today. I really, really, really greatly enjoyed our conversation and our time. And being that, there is a finite amount that you have left, I am extremely thankful that you chose to spend this hour with me. I wish you absolutely all the best on your journey, and you will obviously be in my prayers on a nightly basis.
John, I appreciate that. And, I can't tell you the number of people who tell me, you're going to be in my prayers. That means because I've always said, I kind of believe the Jim Valvano philosophy of, cancer can, you can take anything of the physical abilities, but cancer can't touch my heart, can't touch my soul, can't touch my mind. And, I didn't understand that when he made that speech at the ESPYs in '93. But I certainly do now. And, that's what we are. That's who we are, our mind, our heart, and our soul. And if you can remember that, that's great. And thank you for allowing me to be on your podcast.
Anytime, Terry. I really appreciate the time, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You take care.
You too.